Hey guys, welcome to Office Hours. All right, so for those of you that were joining me yesterday in coaching, feeling much better today, thank you very much. Just a 24-hour little bug there. So now's your chance to ask whatever music questions you have. I want to say hello and welcome to all of my students on YouTube and Facebook that might be joining in. You guys can go ahead and chat in your questions as well. So while I wait for some questions to come in, let me tell you about some upcoming changes and some exciting stuff that's going to be happening. First of all, there's going to be a new app that is going to be hitting the App Store. Hopefully, trying to get it to the Apple Store this week, but it takes a little bit of time. To get it approved and everything, but that's going to be the Jazz Piano Daily app. If you're interested in getting those free lessons, just go back to jazzpianodaily.com. There's 45 days of completely free lessons that you can take a look at, learn from, sheet music, backing tracks, all of that good stuff. All right, so got some questions coming in. Go ahead, Jody. What's your question?
My question is, how would you count off a double time feel Latin tune?
Okay. All right. So a lot of times, let's let me just take. Let me pull up a.
I can give you an example, and you can tell me if it makes sense what
right,
I'm doing.
What's your example?
When Sunny Gets Blue.
Okay.
So I ran into this because if you count it off, just like usually a Latin tune, I count it off 1, chicky, 2, chicky, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you count that off, it's not the right length. So if it would just be like sing a little bit of it. When Sunny Gets Blue.
I counted in 2 then.
1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a.
Yeah, so you would end up probably counting in 2. 2, bum 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 bum, boo ba boo ba boom. So yeah, I'd probably end up counting in 2. So if I put Sunny Gets Blue here, well, here, let me just do this. So it. Oh, weird. Okay, there we go. So if I'm going to do this in like a Latin feel, like a faster Latin feel, 1, 2, So I just counted in 2. I wouldn't count it in 4. I wouldn't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Just 1, 2, ready, go. Or 1, 2, 3, I would do it in 2. So you count it in halftime.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, good. Bruce, you have a singing question.
Yes, I'm throwing this question out to you, Willie, but I'm hoping Jody, feels free to, add something to the conversation. So I'm working on the New York State of Mind, and I'm looking at your accompaniment. So I've never tried singing before. So is there a process to this? I mean, you got to learn the lyrics, obviously, but do you try doing it at the same time? Do you learn each part separately before you put them together? Is there a process to singing and playing at the same time?
Sure. All right, Jody, do you want to toss in your ideas on that? All right.
Big question, Bruce. Have you been trying to do it, singing and playing?
No, this is going to be a first for me. Okay. But I've talked to some. I've looked at some videos online with guitar players, and they basically, the consensus is we'll learn the guitar part so it's automatic before you start singing. Then I saw some other videos where on the piano, play a chord and just sing like whole notes, just to kind of get comfortable with singing and playing notes at the same time. So I'm just trying to figure out, when you want to sing a song and play piano at the same time, do you follow like a process, learning to sing first, play the piano part first, or do it all at the same time?
It all really depends on the material, but I would say the first thing is to make sure you have a comfortable key for yourself. So, sing the melody, and if you find that some of the notes are falling too high or too low, then change the key so that it's in a comfortable range for you. Because
let me jump in here as well to keep this ball rolling. So Bruce, there's never going to be any one specific way of doing it. All right. So Jody approaching singing, you approaching singing, me approaching singing, everyone is going to have their own different take on it. So anyone that says like this is what you're supposed to do first, no, it's all baloney, all right? Especially when it comes down to music, there is no steadfast rule that every time you're going to sit and you're going to learn something, this is what you have to do first. It really depends on the player. Jody's advice of getting a good key, that is spot on. You absolutely have to get a good key. Because what you want to do is go through the music, look for the highest part and the lowest part in the music. So what's the lowest note you're going to sing? What's the highest note you're going to sing? Now, what you might find is that when singing this stuff, especially if it's more than an octave range, like an 11th or whatever, or 10th, 13th, whatever the range is, you're going to find that it might be a little too difficult for you to sing the entire range. So then in that case, you might have to just kind of like mouth some of those words or kind of tweak them a little bit. So my point in that is don't get scared off if it's like, oh, some of it is like way too high. All right, well, maybe some of those high notes, you're just going to have to dog them for right now as your singing voice gets stronger. That's the other thing, too. Just like a piano, how we have piano essentials, well, there's singing essentials as well. You want to go through and you actually want to start to develop your voice. Just like how we do scales, you would do scales and you would do different vocal warm-ups, to really, warm up your voice and then strengthen up your voice. And then also when playing, you want to make sure that you're playing and keeping your core open, not doing this, all right, because you need oxygen and whatnot to be able to get into your body. I would say something like New York State of Mind, keep the accompaniment simple, because it is true, if you have to think about the accompaniment while also thinking about singing, that's two things you're going to think about. And as much as we love to think that, oh, I can multitask, the reality is the brain cannot truly focus on two things simultaneously. So you're best off to like try and get the accompaniment down as best as possible.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to try and copy Billy Joel. That's for sure.
Yeah, his voice has changed too a lot over the years.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. I got B Skills. Hey, Willie, is there a standard method of harmonizing the modes with triads or seventh chords like you would with regular major and minor scales? All right, so I'm not exactly sure what you mean by is there a standard method of harmonizing the modes, but if you have your major scale and you're going to harmonize that scale, well, number one, you can harmonize utilizing your diatonic chords. So this is all my diatonic chords in the key of C major. So if I switch to a mode, let's say I switch to my Dorian mode. Okay. Well, the same thing would hold true here. I would go through and harmonize each one of these notes, but here I would just be utilizing the notes of that Dorian scale. All right, so if I didn't answer your question, then go ahead and chat in, but that's what I would do if I was trying to harmonize a mode. I would be pulling notes just from that scale. Music muscle pianist. Is there a lesson specifically on Rootless 251 progressions other than Piano Essentials 3? Oh yeah. There's a lot of 251 stuff in the site for the Rootless Chords. Number one, you can take a look at some of the lessons in the Confident Improviser. But then if you will also just do a search for the term rootless on the site, you're going to get a bunch of stuff that's going to come up. don't hold on one second. I'm just going to actually pull up the site right here. There is not necessarily a lesson just on rootless 251 progressions, but let me just do a search for the word rootless here on the site. All right, so when you do a search for the word rootless, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff here. I would take a look at this one from the Noble Guide to Jazz Piano. All right, your rootless jazz chords. You're looking for these blue that says View Lesson versus View Chapter. Okay, that would be good to do. This one, Jazz Comping Made Easy, I would take a look at it. Actually, the Noble Guide to Jazz Piano would be really good to take a look at if you have not done that. But then you could see these different TCI exercises as well that are rootless 251s as well. So just take a look at that. So just do a search on the site for the word rootless, and a whole bunch of stuff is going to come up. All right, good. B skills. I'm glad that answered your question. All right, switching back to Zoom here, Michelle. When practicing chords with melody in time at a first basic stage of learning a song, does it matter that the chords might be played differently and melody might change a bit, mostly rhythmically, when reaching the arrangement level? Is it a foundation in any case, even when fills might also be added? In other words, would you consider this initial layer as a foundation in whatever direction the arrangement goes? Yeah, so anytime you're doing something more foundational like that, like, just playing shells along with a melody, all of those foundational skills are going to, or they may or may not make it into the arrangement, but those foundational skills are setting that foundation for you, right? So one thing specifically that I know that you're looking to do right now, Michelle, is that timing, right, for these different songs. So this is where I'm suggesting to you, play the shells, play the melody. It's super just straightforward, super simple. What you don't want to do is you don't want to look at this simplified practice and think, oh, well, how does this work, 10 steps down the road. Instead, you just want to look at it as like, all I'm doing is just a simple arrangement, all right? You're doing My Funny Valentine, right? So in other words, just going... Right? And just very simple, and then you obviously want to do it in time, with the metronome or the backing track, but you're not worrying about any of the fills, you're not worrying about, well, if these chords are going to change or if the melody is going to change. All you're trying to do at this first level is play the song, play it in time with simple chord voicings and the melody, all right? So, in other words, if I put on my backing track here for... My Funny Valentine, all right? I will demonstrate it to you right now and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. All right, so there's My Funny Valentine, small, but enough so you can see it, all right? And then I'm going to turn this into, for right now, just for speed, I'm just going to put it on a medium swing, 100 beats per minute. Not even worried about comping. Now, even that, see how some of those chords, right, a little tight there, right? Because I'm not doing the bass motion there. Absolutely fine. I'm just trying to get down a very simplified arrangement. The reason for this is that I've said it before, but sometimes it's important to say this stuff more than once. And that is that the rhythm is the engine, okay? So you could play all the right notes. I could play all these nice, big, full chords and reharmonizations, whatever. But if I don't play it in a good rhythm, then all of that work is for naught, all right? Whereas if I play simplified shells, but I play them in rhythm and in time, it just sounds good, all right? A good example of this, take a listen to this. So here's There Is No Greater Love, okay? Typically a tune played a little bit fast, you know, so if I put this up at like say 140, actually I want to do this a little bit faster now. Let's even bring this up to like 180. Yeah, let me do that again. I didn't know I was going to do 2 measures. So all I'm doing is shells in the left hand, shells and melody in the right hand. But when played in time and played well in time, it sounds pretty good, right? And then even if you go through and you work out your arrangement, you work out your rootless chords and whatnot, if you had to kind of step down to that basic arrangement, absolutely fine. There are times even now in my playing, I might play shells because the chord is a little bit too low or I want more of an open sound. But the point is, that if I'm going to go back to shells, I need to make sure that it is just completely solid. I'll give you one other way of looking at this, okay? This work of doing shells with the melody is like getting down your rudimentary math, okay? So 2 plus 2 equals 4. If there is any question that 2 plus 2 equals 4, then all math afterwards falls apart, okay? I can't, if I can have you question that 2 plus 2 equals 4, then every other math, or like all math after that, just all falls apart, right? It's meaningless because you're not believing that 2 plus 2 equals 4, or you don't know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. So you have to get down that basic rudimentary skill set first. That's your shells with the melody, right? Once you can do that, then you move on to your other arranging stuff. But what happens a lot of times is students think, yeah, whatever, I got that. You know, I could do the shells, I could do the melody. And then they'll put something like this on and put it on like, you know, not even a super fast tempo, and they're really not playing it in time. Well, guess what? You're not there yet. And if you move on to like the next step or the third or the fifth or the 10th step after that, but you haven't mastered that basic stuff, well, then that's where those cracks start to reveal themselves later on down the road. So. All right. River Sun, singing, do warm-ups, be in a good physical condition, and believe in what you sing about will help. Yep, very good. Thank you. Riverstone, what do you use in a chord shell when there is no 7th? So a lot of times you could use, root 5 root. You could just use the root in the 5th. Sometimes you don't want to use the 7th because the 7th is going to, sometimes it's just a little too tense. So in those cases, I mean, you could even just use an octave. Just play the root of the chord. Now the octaves, that's going to work better for more pop rock kind of stuff, you know, not so much for jazz. If it's jazz, I would at least play a root 5. Sometimes you can also just revert back to the root and 3. Remember, the shell is just that. It's just a shell. So it's not like we're gonna like just play shells and be like, okay, that's it, I'm all done, I don't have to learn anything else at the piano. So the shell is reducing the chord down to something more simplified. So if there's no 7th in the chord, you know, you could do the root 5 root like I said, but just think, how can I simplify this chord? Okay, maybe you bring it down to a triad. Maybe that's what the shell is for right now. It's always going to depend upon the song and the situation. But if you can't play the 7th in there or don't want to play the 7th, then I would go with the root and the 5, and then maybe double the root. Rick, you have a question on arpeggios?
Hey Willie, I'm still working on my scales. I'm playing them every day, a couple every day, and I'm beginning to do the improvisation around them. In one of the sessions last week or the week before, you talked to someone who was doing some improvisation to work on the 6 essential arpeggios. And I'm up to, I think, TCI 9 or 10, where you're starting to do arpeggios. So are working the arpeggios and working those for each of the scales, is that a good idea? Because put the arpeggios aside back when I was doing the scales. It was just it was too much to do all at once and do anything else.
Yeah. Well, when we think about learning really anything, but let's stay focused to the piano, but it truly is anything that we want to learn, or anything I should say that has some meat, like that's big. Like learning an instrument is not just like, wow, I'm going to take the weekend and I'm going to learn how to play piano. It's not quite that simple. So anytime we have something that meaty that we want to learn, something that literally takes like a lifetime to learn, we really want to kind of be clear, first of all, with what our goals are, right? So, and you know how much I don't really love the word goals. I really like thinking more in terms of focus, because your goals will change, you know? And then if you say, hey, my goal is to do this, and also a lot of times, you know, like people are very bad at like making these long-term goals. It's usually something like, I want to learn to play jazz piano. All right, well, that doesn't really help you, because what does that mean? You want to learn to play jazz piano? That could be 1,000 different things to 1,000 different people. So I like to think, okay, well, what is my focus? So now think, what is your focus for, like, say, the next 3 to 6 months? And how would arpeggios serve that focus? So for you, if you were like saying to me, hey, look, I just really love that, like, you know, like, I want to get down more of that arpeggiated kind of sound, or I really want to get it. I want to bring these arpeggios into my improvisation, then yes, and I would say that you should focus on the arpeggios. So really think more and try and get more clear with what is the focus over the next 3 to 6 months, and do arpeggios fit into that?
And that's why I was thinking maybe working on the arpeggios would make sense, because I want to bring those arpeggios into the improvisation, because it seems like, you know, doing arpeggios is sort of the core of a lot of the improvisation I'm hearing. Like I just recently discovered Bill Lawrence. Now I don't think I'll ever get to Bill Lawrence's stage, but he's doing a ton of arpeggios and almost percussive kinds of arpeggios. So to me, it seemed like that was the right next thing to learn. It sort of built on TCI, you know, were 9 and 10, but you know, I may be incorrect about that, but that was why that's where learning to be able to do something improvisationally with the arpeggios. And eventually I want to be able to, you know, do a decent version of the standard with some improvisation, not crazy. And then I also just want to be able to sit down and just start messing around with a progression in the left hand, and then just playing junk in the right hand, and just seeing if I can find things that are fun to play and sound good and are fun. That's kind of where I want to try to get in the next, you know, I won't get there in the next year, but in the next 3 or 4 years. And in the next year, you know how I am. I really want to make sure I'm not trying to jump forward, and I'm working on the fundamentals. So I'm doing all the scales. I'm just, you know, and I enjoy it. It's just, you know, and I keep taking the speed up, and it's helping me with the chords and everything. So that's where I thought maybe arpeggios would fit in.
Yeah. First of all, forget about even saying I won't get there. And who cares? Like, you get there when you get there. Like, don't start with a negative immediately, because you're immediately telling yourself you're not going to do it. So, in which case you won't do it. So forget about that. Like, get rid of that negative thought process. In terms of doing the arpeggio, like this is why you're going to see like the changes in coaching and how I'm going to be bringing stuff all together, because this is what's so important, is that for you, Rick, you want to do arpeggios? Absolutely, you should do it. But there is no one right path for everybody, right? So if you want to do arpeggios and you're already working your piano essentials, what I would suggest that you do is pick one type of chord for right now to really dive into, right? Now, I would say minor 7 chords. Minor 7 chords are a really nice chord to dive into with your arpeggios, because then, like, when you're doing that minor 7 chord, like say C minor 7, if I do the rootless chord here, say, like that minor 7 chord, and then really working the arpeggios of that minor 7, you know, like maybe go all the way up to the 11th with your upper structure, and then you see how when you move to the dominant in a 2-5, then you maybe could bring in the altered scale and then resolve it down to the 1. But I would start with just one chord quality for right now. Why only one chord quality? Because guess what? You could drive yourself insane if you think, I'm going to do all of my arpeggios in all 12 keys. Well, great, Rick. I'll see you in 3 years because you have literally tons and tons and tons and tons of work to do. And what that's going to do is it's going to put so much work on your plate that you might not even finish it. And then that's not going to feel good. So I would start with just the minor 7 chord arpeggio. I would though. Now, if you want to do the whole 2-hand like this, all of that is fine. But again, you have to think about, what is my focus? Are you ever going to be playing arpeggios like that? Or are you going to be playing more small group kind of stuff?
That's what I want.
All right, so if that's what you're going to be doing, forget about doing the arpeggios in the left hand. Oh, wait a second, Willie, but you really should. Well, yeah, sure. If you're going to go to music college, you want to play Carnegie Hall, you're going to be doing gigs for the rest of your life, yeah, then you want to do all of that stuff. But we're talking practical here, right? So if we're talking practical and trying to actually play it, practice it, and use it as soon as possible, then do your rootless chords over here. Focus on the arpeggio over there in the right hand. Now, one other tweak that you could do is you could do something. So like take those 2 arpeggios, right, and then for the F7, right, you could take like maybe your diminished chord, and then here, see how I arpeggiated that B flat major 7th chord. Remember, the arpeggio doesn't have to be just off of the block chord. It could be the rootless chord, right? So I get. Just what I did there, C minor. Notice it's the same notes that I'm playing in the left hand. All right, so you can like practice that all through, your cycle 4 and whatnot, and really work out that more compacted arpeggio, not a multiple octave arpeggio, but kind of compacted where you could get the arpeggiated sound without having to worry about all of the cross stuff, right? So that's another way in which you can start. Or you could just simply say, okay, I'm just going to focus just on my minor chords for right now, put on iReal Pro. You can make a very simple track in which you go through all 12 minor 7th chords, or maybe what you do is simply take one of those TCI iReal Pro tracks in which you have 4 keys, right? 4 measures of each key. So maybe it's C minor 7, F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat minor 7. You do that, and then once you feel comfortable with that, you go into iReal Pro, you change the key, and now you got 4 new keys. Change again, 4 new keys again. Right, so that's another way you can do it. But again, always come back to it and say, okay, well, what is my focus, and how can I practically practice something that then I can apply quickly? The only thing that I really suggest that everyone does that is a very straight in the box, practice routine is practice those major scales at least 2 hands, 2 octaves. Right, do that. All of your other stuff. What's that?
That's what I'm doing every day. I'm doing a little hand to warm up, and then I just, I don't do every scale, but I do, because I am kind of doing a little bit of improvisation around them, just to sort of try to help, that helps me memorize where the key, not memorize, but, kind of solidify where the keys are. So
Absolutely. Okay. But, so that's the one thing I would say everybody needs to do. You got to do that. But then when it comes to this other stuff, like let's take the chromatic scale. Hey, Willie, should I practice the chromatic scale? Again, people get upset at me like, oh, you got so much stuff on your site, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to quit. That's why you got to ask me, because, like, say Bruce asked me, should I practice my chromatic scale? I'd say, Bruce, you're probably not going to need the chromatic scale when you're doing New York State of Mind, right? I mean, like the chromatic scale in New York State of Mind is not really, where you should be focusing your attention right now, because I don't think of New York State of Mind as a bebop tune, right? Now, if Bruce said, hey, man, I just want to dig into bebop and doing rhythm changes, then yes, you should be practicing that chromatic scale. So it's all about focus. It's all about what is your focus And the focus is not this long-term, years long from now. No, 3 to 6 months, where do you want to get, and how does what you want to practice fit into the reality of your piano playing? If it doesn't fit into the reality and you're just practicing something just to practice something, that's fine. But again, that kind of practice is more like, hey, look, this is what I do 24/7. I'm a musician. I'm going to be going out and gigging. I want to be the guy. I want to be the best of the best. Okay, then you got to practice all of that stuff. If you're coming from it like, hey, I just want to have some fun and be able to play some tunes and maybe play with some people in a jam session, then you really want to think more about your focus. Otherwise, you could just completely inundate yourself with stuff to practice.
Yeah, agreed. All right, that's good. Right, thanks.
You got it. All right. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, I got a follow-up question on the arpeggios. What if you're not playing a jazz tune, you're playing kind of a, and I know you don't like the term. We've talked about this before, but sort of a pop tune, but you want to play it in sort of that, not jazz, but not straight, where you want to put in some of those, like you say, some keyboard players will run up the keyboard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that cocktail style.
Yeah.
It's not. So in that case, is that a place where arpeggios would, is that what they're playing actually, arpeggios, or are they playing scales when they do that?
Yeah, so I'm sure you could find a more real technical definition, but when I think of scale versus arpeggio, I'm thinking of an arpeggio being separated not by steps, but by skips and leaps, okay? So in other words, like if I go, that's a scale. It's all whole steps, half steps, right? So it's all steps. Whereas if I go, that's an arpeggio. But this is also an arpeggio as well. That's an arpeggiated root 5 root. Okay? So it depends. Like if I'm playing like, so if I'm going to do New York State of Mind, right? So you see how I can I can do like this kind of stuff. Here on the B flat 7, what am I doing? I'm actually playing a sus4 in there, and I'm playing the 7th in there. And you see how I kind of come back up? This note becomes the thumb, right?
Yeah.
All right, so you can see now here, so you can hear that I'm arpeggiating. It's not quite scalar. I'm breaking up these chords. I'm arpeggiating these chords. So some people will think of arpeggiating being more like that, and versus some people would say that that's not arpeggiated, that's broken chords. I'm not going to get into that fight, right? I look at it in terms of anytime I'm breaking up those chords, I'm thinking of it as arpeggiating those notes, okay? So anyway, with that said, notice it doesn't have to be like the full kind of jazzy kind of sound. Now I could... I could get a little bit more jazzy with that depending on the chord voicings that I choose, like see the B flat 7. Woo, baby. On that D7 chord. All right, so and then just as a little sidebar on that, see how you could do everything straight and then maybe just bam, hit that one chord right there with that sharp 11 in there.
Yeah.
Right? And it gives it that nice big kind of jazzy sound, and then go back into the more pop kind of sound from there. Does that answer your question, though, Bruce?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so really, if you're going to do like New York State of Mind, one thing I would recommend that you do is worry less about, okay, I got to practice these arpeggios, and instead start with something very simple. I would start with just single note left hand, okay? Just one note in the left hand. All right, so I'm just like breaking up these chords, arpeggian, whatever the heck you want to call it, but I'm breaking them up, and I'm just trying to break it up and trying to do it in time. I would try doing that first. And I got a little bit slicker with that, with throwing in some of the sevenths. Start with just the triads first. It's amazing to me how many players want to get to all like that, like big stuff. They can't do that, right? The foundational, the fundamentals, right? Just being able to break up the chords and being able to think about them that quick and being able to break them up that fast, they can't do that. This is the challenge that we run into as adults. I'm not going to mince words here. I'm going to tell you that we all are like striving for that brass ring. We think, oh, I could do that brass ring. You know, I could do that, 540 kick, right? I'm 48 years old. I don't need to stretch or warm up. And then what happens? I fall on my butt and I twist an ankle or something. And I'm like, oh, I guess I can't do it, right? So you gotta nail those fundamentals, right? And then, especially like with pop rock, you have to know these chords, the triads. You have to know these triads inside and out. So if I ask you, like if I said to you real quickly, here's a test for you. If I said a chord, how fast can you get to it? E minor, F major, A flat major, B minor, D major, C minor. If you can't be E minor, A flat major, B flat major, B flat minor, B minor, E minor, if you can't get to it that fast, then you don't know it yet, all right? And then that's what you want to get to first, and then from there, then you can start to break them up. So since you're already doing New York State of Mind, like just try going through the chords. All right, so and then go through the chords and don't worry about trying to do them in time. Do them one after another. C, E, A, G, C, F, A, D, B flat, C. And then this part right here with the descending, you could do the left hand with that. Can you blast through those chords that fast? You know them that well that you can play them that fast? Or do you need the benefit of the time in the song and the progression in order to be able to hit that chord, right? Yeah. So, I'm
good with the triads. It's just the where I'm slow in is like the rootless voicings with the the sharp 11th and the
absolutely
that takes that. I'm still working to get the speed on that, but the triads, I'm pretty good. And I think that's why if I'm going to try and sing a tune, New York's like it is, because it is a rock tune, you can, if you really know the triads well, you can get that accompaniment pretty basic.
Oh yeah. Like you play, some folks like to get away, take a holiday in the neighborhood. South Beach to Miami Beach or to Hollywood. And I mean, you could just like, right? So I mean, like, I notice what I'm doing. Gaw, gaw, gaw. I mean, like rhythmically, I'm not doing anything special, with that
Right.
with the accompaniment. So I could just kind of blast through it super simple like that,
Yeah.
and then sing over the top of it. And guess what? People are gonna love it. I could do that. Some folks like to get away, like a holiday in the neighborhood. Hey, here I am, sort of Hollywood. Right? I didn't do anything special with the accompaniment. But if I
Right.
sang it with the actual right lyrics, people would be like, oh, that's great. I love that. All right?
Yeah.
Usually simpler is better. The more
Yeah.
complicated you get, it's too much for
Yeah.
for people's ears. Okay. Let's see here. Jody, and the same thing with learning a tune vocally, try singing it strongly with just the bass notes. Oh yeah, that's another great idea, right? So just have that bass motion. And if it's a rock tune, you could do it in octaves. Some folks like to get away.
Good idea.
But singing that melody over just the bass motion is great because that is really going to solidify whether or not you know that melody or not. Right. So that would be good. River Sunstone, finding inversions fast. All right. I'm assuming that's a question. So go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question. And while I'm waiting for that, Muscle Pianist on YouTube. You lift, bro. Actually, I do. Actually, I've gotten back to lifting. I will say this. Exercise is really important as a musician. So if you want to really find your best self at your instrument, make sure you're doing some kind of exercise, right? Make it appropriate for what it is for you, but some kind of exercise is good. Also, be sure that you're doing like some of those stretches. Like we have a tendency as human beings, especially with computers and everything, it's a lot of in like this. You want to try and open up that chest, okay? So that could be in the door, right? You know, like if I had a wall there, right? Stretching this out, doing it all carefully and all of that good stuff. But exercise and stretching, super, super important. River Sun, are you on? Okay, no, all right, so I'm gonna keep moving on. Mark asks, will you be demonstrating enclosures over Fly Me to the Moon on further bars through the form of the tune, or is the improv on the tune finished for now? For Jazz Piano Daily, that's what I have done for now. Jazz Piano Daily is not really meant or designed to go through the entire song. It's more to give you ideas that you can then bring into your practice. If you want more of a step-by-step improvisation approach, then I would check out the Confident Improviser over at Jazz Edge. That along with Standards by the Dozen is really kind of what you're looking for. If you want to learn to play standards and improvise over them, those two courses right there at Jazz Edge would be the place to go. Hello, Nathan. Welcome. Second question. Misty, left-hand stride is covered in Jazz Piano Daily for the three. Do I do stride through the whole tune in Standards by the Dozen at Jazz Edge? Yes. Whatever I did in Jazz Piano Daily, I'm pretty sure that I took that right out of the arrangement that's at Jazz Edge. So yes, you will find that over at Jazz Edge. Okay. All right. No mic for River Sun. All right. How to find inversions fast? Okay. Now that's a really good question. I think one of the best things that you could do for yourself is practice away from the piano. And I know spelling chords away from the piano is challenging for some. I didn't realize until we were talking about this a few months back that a lot of students don't really learn C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. They learn Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do, all right? And then when you're learning the solfege approach, it's a little bit harder to spell chords because you're like Do, Mi, Sol, Do, Mi, right? It's just, music theory and solfege, they kind of have a kind of a tough time together. And what I would say is if you're used to doing a solfege approach of like learning notes or just practice in general, you really want to move over to the note name approach for that, right? For music theory and for spelling chords. Really super important because a major triad is not just do, mi, sol, right? So a C major triad is also C, E, G. Because if I ask you, well, what's the third of a C major triad? It's not mi, right? It's E, right? So you want to make sure that you know that kind of stuff. So now to your question of learning inversions fast, there is no secret way of being able to do this that makes it any faster than any other way. I would suggest if you start with your triads first, okay? Like just major and minor triads. There's plenty of them. You got 24 major and minor triads. So start by spelling out your major and minor triads. Let's take a key, for instance. A flat major, okay? So A flat, C, E flat, all right? That's my root position A flat major triad. Now, once I have those three notes, all of the other notes are, all the other inversions, I should say, are going to use those same three notes. I'm just going to take the A flat, I'm going to move it up an octave, so then it's C, E flat, A flat. Then E flat, A flat, C, A flat, C, E flat, C, E flat, A flat, E flat, A flat, C, A flat, C, E flat. Okay, and that's, again, root position, first inversion, second inversion, back to root position. So I will visualize what that looks like in my mind's eye, and I could see in that virtual keyboard that those three notes there, that's what I see in my mind's eye right now. I could see that pattern, right? And then being able to know that it's also a C and an E flat in that chord, right? So you see how I'll keep coming back to that theory. I rely on that theory. I am not relying on my physical touch. Right? So I'm not using kinesthetic. Even though that plays a part, I don't rely on that because relying on physical touch at the instrument is a surefire way of getting frustrated and not being able to play the stuff that you want to play. Right? It all comes back to music theory. Right? You have to know the music theory. And if you don't know the theory, you're going to be severely limited. So start with the major triads first. Go through, spell all of them. Simple. C major triad, C, E, G, first inversion, E, G, C, second inversion, G, C, E, root position, C, E, G. Great. G major triad, G, B, D, B, D, G, D, G, B, G, B, D. D major triad, D, F sharp A, F sharp A, D, F sharp, right? And then while you're doing this, make sure that you're kind of visually thinking of what that looks like, right? Notice I will do this away from the piano, right? Because when I play it on the piano, like, I kind of play around until like, that's it. That sounds right. No. Whereas when I do it away from the piano, I cannot rely on my ears or my touch to tell me what the right notes are. I have to know the theory. Okay. So your major triads, I would start with that one first. Let's see. Ben, how do we get the right fingerings for scales improv? All right, well, first of all, it starts with go through those piano essentials, okay? So make sure you're going through all 12 major scales and make sure you're playing those with your proper fingering. All of the fingering for all 12 major scales is all worked out, right? There's no question, there's no ambiguity, just learn it. You don't want to learn it? Okay, well, then you're going to have to suffer those consequences, right? So make sure that you learn the 12 major scales with the proper fingering first. Okay, now, once you could do that, the next step after that is, I would say, take a look at your chromatic scale. Chromatic scale is super important to practice. Why? Because we utilize so much... We use so much chromaticism in our improvisation that if you can't play that chromatic scale going up and down, right, and playing that with the proper fingering, well, again, now you're going to be lost. All right, so major scales, then chromatic scale. The next step is take one scale that you're working on for improvisation, play the chord, play the bass line, whatever you want to do for accompaniment in the left hand, shells, all right, just do something. Okay, if I want to play it real simple, all right, I'll do it in C because the G minor is a little too low. All right, so I'm going to just take my C minor scale, okay? Or in fact, you know what? Let's change it up a little bit. Let's take my C altered scale here, right? And I'll do. So then what I'm going to do is I could put on my metronome, I could put on a backing track. I'm not going to waste the time right now. Basically, play along with something metronomic to keep your time. So then you just play your scale. So you see, I'm taking one scale. I'm playing a simple accompaniment in the left hand, and I'm just trying to improvise utilizing that one scale, okay? Notice I'm improvising, I'm not just... You should be able to do that relatively quickly, just playing the scale up and down. But then it comes down to... Like, what do I do when I start playing around with this scale? What happens with the fingering? And oftentimes, that's what falls apart for students, is that fingering when you're just in free-form improvisation land. So you take one chord, one scale, and you just free-form improvisation from there. There's many other things that you could do after that, but I would start with that first. So do the major scale, do the chromatic scale, just playing them up and down as written, okay? And then pick one scale to improvise over. Don't forget, that one scale can also just be... Could just be your major scale. And remember this too, when improvising, notice how when I improvise on that major scale, I ended up hitting my middle finger on that C at one point. The fingering that you play when practicing the scale is not the same fingering that you're going to play when improvising over the scale. Or at least I should say, it's not going to only be the fingering that you're going to use. Imagine if when improvising using the C major scale, I always had to hit my thumb or my pinky on the C in order for it to be correct. That would be ridiculous, all right? I wouldn't be able to play anything. I would constantly be getting jammed up. So when it comes to improvisation, I might put my fifth finger, fourth finger, middle finger, second finger, thumb on that note C, right? But the only way that I'm going to get good at being able to do that is I have to stay within one scale. Why one scale? Because if you just go on and you start like improvising over a 2-5-1, 5-7 and 2 progressions or over an entire song, now you're likely going to start to incorporate multiple scales. And at that point, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for you to really kind of get down your fingering, because now you're not just worrying about your fingering, you're also worrying about what notes to play. When you simply take one scale and you're just saying, hey, look, I'm just going to blast out with my C major scale. Okay, well, it's pretty simple, because if you play any black note, you know that you're outside of that scale. So then this allows you to like really freely improvise while focusing just on fingering versus notes. Okay, I'm divided. On the one hand, I play Bach chorales with lots of line movements and such, and on the other hand, when I play a standard, I go through a simplistic shell voicing, 1-3-7 and melody. Okay, I'm going to, that was it for the question, so I'm going to assume that that means that, hey, look, classical, I could play at this level, which sounds super full and super hip, but at jazz, I'm playing at this level, okay? That's because when you play jazz and you're playing a standard, you are creating the arrangement. You. It is not written out for you, you're creating it. Now, you could simply get on the Jazz Edge site, you could download the sheet music for Standard by the Dozen lessons and just play my arrangements note for note and then call it a day, and that would be fine. Nothing wrong with that, okay? If that's your jam, that's fine. But for those students that want to like actually learn how to create their own arrangements, well, obviously, you know, Bach's skill level, you know, was decades of development. You can't bring that same skill level to standards right away. So you got to start with the basics first, okay? Does it suck? Yeah, it does, okay? I mean, it stinks. I mean, I've been doing karate for 7 years. Guess what? When I started, I'm like on the mat next to 5-year-olds. And I'm still on the mat next to 5-year-olds right now. It's just the way this karate studio works, okay? Now, I'm doing more advanced stuff, but I still have to be in that foundational. I'm still surrounded by that foundational stuff as well. So what you have to do is you got to start with that foundation first, right? And then once you feel comfortable with it, then you add. Now, the beauty is, no one says how long you're going to stay in foundational. That's really up to you. I would say this, if you could go through, you could play 10 to 20 standards using shells, bam, throw on the iReal Pro track, and you could play it in time, you're good. You probably know your shells pretty well at that point. But if you're struggling to be able to play shells in time and get to the next shell and, oh, what is it and what are the notes, and playing it hands together and you can't play it in time, or you say, oh, I got to play it super slow, all right, well then you likely don't know the shells just yet. Absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It takes however long it takes you to learn it. But you got to do that first, right, and really kind of get that down before you add on this more advanced stuff. Otherwise, you're going to try adding on the advanced stuff, and then you're going to find holes in your playing. And I will tell you that when you find holes in your playing later on, it is really demoralizing to have to go back and fix some of that, some of that more basic stuff. Okay, that's why in Jazz Edge Core, right on the dashboard, everything is just flows exactly in the order that you should do it. Now, if you skip ahead, I got no control over that, right? I mean, you can go and you can look at whatever you want on the site. But if you actually follow along in order, and if you actually learn the stuff and master it in order, then you're going to be just fine. Okay, well, so standards by the dozen. It's the next step that you don't understand. So standards by the dozen, you start with shells and then take a look at the standards by the dozen course. That will explain where you go from there and what you should be doing from there. Any tips for speed when playing the chromatic scale? Maybe my hand position is bad, but I have problems with the descending chromatic scale. Actually, this is one thing that I'm going to be doing a lesson on as well, is trying to find waypoints, right? And a waypoint is basically just a point in your improvisation that you're trying to get your energy to. The thing to remember about playing the instrument is that there is a flow of energy, right? So when I'm doing this, I'll give you another way of thinking about it. You know, football, like American football, not European football with the soccer ball, right? Like the football, right? You see these football players, they run. They are huge people, right? Big guys. They're running in one direction, and then bam, you see them move quickly into another direction. Very, very difficult to do. Like you have all this force and mass moving in one direction, and immediately they move into another direction. That's about the extent of my football love, right? I'm not a huge sports fan. But I do find that to be fascinating, that control of their body to be able to switch direction like that. Well, that exact same thing, right, same concept, applies to the piano as well. If I'm trying to play fast on something, right, if I'm thinking of my direction moving this way, but I'm trying to go that way, then I'm not going to be able to play fast. I want to think, okay, where am I trying to get to? So in other words, like, let's say I want to get to that E. See how I'll stick on that E? And then this stuff in the middle, it might get a little mushy in there, right? It might not be exactly as clean as I want it to be, but that's okay because I'm trying to go from here to there, right? So one thing I would suggest you practice is take a scale like the chromatic scale, find different waypoints. Maybe you want to come all the way down to the C. I would say start with something a little bit smaller at first. Maybe go from C down to G. And down here, I'm just playing like C7 guide tones. You can play nothing if you want. All right? But you do that kind of stuff, and what you're trying to focus on is you're trying to focus on getting that energy moving this way. Right? Now, what do you notice? Watch this. Right here. Right in my elbow. You see that natural motion that's going on there? Okay, is that happening in your playing as well? Videotape yourself, okay? Record yourself from the side. Look physically at what's going on. Now look at this. All right, I'm still getting there, but what do you notice? I'm actually actively working against and trying to go this way. And you'll notice that the line sounds a lot more tense, doesn't it? It doesn't sound very fluid and free, whereas sounds better because I have to work so much harder to get those fingers to do what I want them to do because I'm not utilizing my body as well in that waypoint. All right. So those ideas will kind of help you kind of get going. Let's see here. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else have any other quick questions before I let you go? Going once? Going twice? All right. All right, so thank you guys very much for joining me today. I will see you guys next week. And like I said, just be on the lookout. I'm going to be sending out some information about what's going to be happening with the coaching stuff. I think that you'll like some of the changes, and it'll be exciting for you. All right, so anyway, that's it for me. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.